Video game designer Brendan explains that scientists put rats inside mazes to study how organisms use their memory to learn, adapt, and evolve as they create an internal map of their world. He reads these research on a regular basis because he bases his game design on them and believes that civilization would not advance without memory. One day, Brendan goes to the beach with his wife, Claire, and their daughter, Sam. They had an amazing time together, and Sam says she'll go shell hunting with her Curious George toy and swears she won't go in the sea after taking a quick nap. But as Sam is preoccupied with the shells, the monkey is taken by the waves, so she wades into the ocean to get it back. Sadly, the sea is too powerful and she never returns. Brendan and Claire are devastated, even though the family shows them all of their love throughout the funeral. Claire continues to believe that this isn't true, and Brendan finds it difficult to stop crying in his daughter's room. A few months later, Claire decides it's time to move and starts packing up Sam's room. But Brendan isn't ready yet, and he freaks out and asks his wife to make things right again right away. When he grabs his daughter's favorite books, he notices the title Berenstain Bears is written with an A, although he remembers it with an E. Later on in the evening, Brendan hears a noise that keeps him awake. He walks to the kitchen brandishing a bat and nearly strikes, but it's just his brother-in-law Matt robbing the refrigerator. While speaking over a late-night snack, Brendan asks Matt about the book's title. Matt is happy to learn that Brendan, too, believed it was written with an E. Brendan searches the internet for an explanation because he is still unable to fall asleep, and he comes across thousands of stories. Many others believe there is a conspiracy because they have similar memories to him, but Brendan finally learns about a phenomenon known as the Mandela effect, which is when a large group of people have identical recollections. They usually blame it on alternate timelines or parallel universes, and its name comes from the fact many people had thought Mandela died in prison. As Claire gets ready to go back to work the following morning, Brendan spots a family photo on their refrigerator. When Brendan inquires about the location of the shot, Claire affirms that it was taken at the Griffith Observatory. Instead, Brendan recalls capturing that identical photo at the Pacific Science Center. Claire assumes he's merely lost for words and resumes her job. After that, Brendan shares with Matt his research on the Mandela effect, complete with an explanation and numerous examples, such as the quotation from Darth Vader, the spelling of Looney Tunes, and Mandela's own death. Matt dismisses Brendan's claims that they are either a part of a simulation or that they are hopping between different realms. Brendan investigates the phenomenon further over the next few days, seeing a ton of films on topics like string theory and even the potential existence of a real matrix. Brendan takes lots of notes and becomes obsessed with the subject, which is probably a way to keep his mind busy and ignore his grief. One afternoon, Brendan visits a priest to ask why God would take the life of a child like Sam. The priest explains that Sam's death wasn't God's plan or desire, it was just a matter of free will, which many consider the greatest gift that God ever gave humanity. When Brendan returns home, he starts investigating free will as part of his obsession. After a while, Brendan sees Matt once more and keeps bringing up the topic. Matt notes that he spoke with a friend of his who works as a neurologist, and she clarified that our brains have many gaps that are filled in by outside information and that memories can become jumbled. But Brendan is obstinate and won't believe it's just a coincidence. Later at dinner, Claire admits that Brendan has been acting quite withdrawn recently and she worries about him. She also recommends that he talk to someone about his problems. Claire replies that the Monopoly guy has a monocle when Brendan asks her to describe him, but when she looks at the game box, she discovers that the small guy is actually completely blank-faced. Subsequently, Brendan pulls out Sam's copy of Curious George, claiming that the plush toy had a tail and that the monkey in the illustrations did too. Although Claire objects to the way their daughter's death is being used, Brendan persists in bringing up the fact that Claire even stated following the funeral that it didn't feel real. When he starts talking about realities shifting, Claire snaps and scolds Brendan for refusing to move on and pouring his grief into this dumb obsession instead. Sometime later, Brendan and Claire go out on a double with Matt and his new boyfriend. Brendan is lost in thought and barely paying any attention to the conversation, so he tries to escape to the bar, but Matt reminds him he and Claire need to support each other. Brendan acknowledges that and goes back to the table. Brendan, however, immediately returns home and fires up the computer to investigate the simulation theory, which holds that our world is computer programmed. With a growing amount of notes, Brendan begins posting on a board in an attempt to discover evidence of a parallel universe in which Sam survives. After watching videos of well-known individuals discussing the topic, such as Elon Musk and Neil deGrasse Tyson, he eventually comes across the name Roland Fuchs, who is supposedly developing a method to validate the simulation. However, the video he finds on websites isn't working anymore, so he has to turn to piracy sites that keep a backup of it. The file he downloads is corrupted, but by using special software he manages to fix it. The video shows Dr. Fuchs giving a lecture about the simulation theory, but unfortunately it gets corrupted again and Brendan's left with nothing. Refusing to give up, Brendan searches where Fuchs is working nowadays and records a video message for him. Days pass, and Brendan never hears back from Fuchs, so he travels to the university to contact the doctor in person. Fuchs, though, is too busy and doesn't have time to listen to a random fan's digression. Later that evening, Brendan makes an effort to be a better spouse by becoming flirtatious with Claire. However, he breaks off their conversation abruptly because he believes he hears Sam shouting for him. Claire, who is frustrated, advises him to consult a bereavement counselor. The next day, instead of seeing a counselor as he promised, Brendan shows up at Fuchs' house and convinces him to give him a few minutes of his time. Fuchs clarifies that the Mandela effect is merely an instance of false memories, but he also believes that the traces are caused by glitches in the simulation that we live in following a system upgrade. Brendan argues that he should be able to hack reality if it's just computer code, but Fuchs finds that absurd and brings him to the university. They talk about the idea that the world exists just because a conscious being is viewing it while traveling there. Brendan draws a comparison between it with how places in video games load only when the player enters them. Otherwise, they remain empty. Hence, he should overdo the simulation to overload the processor rather than hacking it. Fuchs explains that this university has a quantum computer, indicating that only an extremely powerful machine could accomplish such a thing. Together they enter the lab, but while Fuchs is describing how to enter a code, Dr. Manning, who objects to Brendan's presence, interrupts them. The two head straight back to the doctor's house, where Fuchs tells Brendan that ideas may be hazardous and adds that he believes the simulation attempted to stop him because he is a flaw in the system. Comparing the person behind the simulation to corporate and governmental power, Brendan questions whether they are playing for fun or whether they are seeking power. Later on in the evening, Brendan dreams about Sam's passing and awakens to the sound of her cries for him. He rushes to Sam's room and sees a human shadow, which suddenly glitches and disappears. He tries to go for a drive to clear his mind, but he can't stop seeing the world as a giant chain of code connected to a quantum computer. Eventually, he falls asleep in the car and wakes up in a random alley downtown. Suddenly, he hears a horrible high-pitched sound and he screams in pain as reality starts glitching, only to suddenly blink and wake up in his usual bed. When Brendan leaves the room, he's shocked to see Sam in her own room and Claire comes to drag her to the bathroom. But all he finds when he follows them is his wife brushing her teeth. Claire does all in her power to console Brendan, who believes he is going insane. Subsequently, Brendan visits the library to select several books on quantum computing and begins developing a code that has the potential to overwhelm the simulation. Claire is concerned when Brendan spends all of his time coding for the following few days. Sam appears in her parents' room one night and gets into bed after having a nightmare. Beside her, Brendan sleeps soundly, but when he wakes up in the morning, the bed is empty. Brendan goes downstairs thinking it was a dream, only to find Sam there acting as if nothing had occurred. Claire and Matt treat her normally too, so Brendan calls everyone he knows to confirm his suspicions. Nobody remembers Sam dying, so reality has been rewritten. He tries to discuss this with Fuchs, but he won't answer his calls. Brendan thinks the simulation gave him his daughter back so he would stop the creation of the code, but he doesn't care. He's happy to have Sam back. The family spends lots of time together and is very happy until one night when Claire wakes up from a terrible nightmare in an awful state. She swears she's just fine, but the next day Brendan finds the breakfast burning and Claire spacing out. Brendan takes the family to paint some pottery together in an attempt to lift her spirits. When he notices cracks in his pot, Claire becomes irrationally angry and smashes everything on the ground since they aren't utilizing the color she desires. Brendan makes the decision to head back home and attempts to get Claire to sleep, but she freaks out and keeps staring at Sam. Fearing that his spouse would become ill due to the reality shift, Brendan asks Matt to watch Sam while he hurries to Fuchs' house, only to be met by the physician's spouse. It comes out that the reason he self-deleted 2 months ago was that the scientific community did not take him seriously. As Brendan thinks he saw Fuchs just 2 days ago, a crack appears on the glass, which he also sees as a sign from the simulation. Determined to make things right, Brendan rushes to his house and starts working on the code again. In case the simulation kills him as badly as he believes it killed Fuchs, he also films a video for his loved ones. Matt tends to Claire, who has gone catatonic, while Brendan is at work. When the code is at last finished, Manning tries to contact security and blocks Brendan from accessing the quantum computer at the university. In an attempt to stop him, Brendan leaps on him, but he pushes too hard, hitting Manning in the head, causing him to fall to the ground and suddenly die. Despite his intense guilt, Brendan takes Manning's card key and continues. Once he reaches the computer, Brendan implants his code with a USB stick, and he watches the numbers go by as the computer lights flicker. Soon the machine starts to make a weird noise, so Brendan rushes outside, only to discover that the parking lot is empty and his car is gone. In a blink, he finds himself on a bus and he gets a call from his wife saying she doesn't feel good. At that moment, he notices a passenger glitching as she goes through the bus floor, and a couple nearby have glitching faces too. Brendan gets off the bus and runs through the city, noticing all kinds of glitches going on. The time of the day constantly changes, the trees go through different colors, and there are 2 moons in the sky. Eventually, Brendan gets home and rushes to hold his wife and daughter close as the environment around them also glitches like crazy. Claire's face glitches too, and she screams in pain while the 2 moons collide in the sky before everything goes pitch black. Then the code appears on the screen as the universe reboots itself from the very beginning of existence, going through dinosaurs, lost civilizations, wars, and the usual important moments of human history. When the reboot finally stops, Brendan is glad to be on the beach with his family again. This time, when Sam mentions she'll go looking for shells, Brendan makes her leave the curious George behind, saving her life.